The rain was coming down sideways off the Cumberland River that October evening, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and stays there. I was 70 years old. Bad hip. Doctor told me to stop driving in bad weather. I didn't listen. I was heading to the hardware store, a normal Tuesday errand. That's all it was supposed to be. I stopped at a red light on Broadway, the heater humming, the wipers losing the fight against the downpour. And that's when I saw her. A woman on the corner, soaked through, coat 3 sizes too big, holding a piece of cardboard that had turned to mush in the rain. And pressed against her chest, wrapped in a black trash bag, was a bundle, a small, moving bundle. Most people in the cars around me looked away. I almost did too. But then she turned slightly to shield the baby from a passing truck spray, and I saw her face. My daughter, my Caroline. I hadn't seen her like this in my worst nightmares. She was supposed to be living in a beautiful home in Brentwood with her successful husband. Instead, she was standing in the rain, begging, with my granddaughter. I threw the truck into park right there in traffic, and I ran. If this story touched you, leave a like. Tell me your city in the comments. And subscribe so you never miss a new story. Before I tell you what happened at that corner, I need to tell you who I am. My name is Frank. I'm a retired construction foreman from Nashville, Tennessee. I raised Caroline on my own after her mother, my wife Linda, passed from breast cancer when Caroline was just 14. Hardest years of my life. Just the 2 of us in that little house on Elm Creek Road, eating cereal for dinner some nights, figuring it out together. Caroline was sharp, funny. She had Linda's laugh and my stubbornness. She put herself through nursing school. I was so proud I cried at her graduation. Me, a man who hadn't cried since Linda's funeral. Then she met Richard Holloway. Richard was polished in the way that made old men like me nervous. The kind of man who wore a suit to a barbecue and smiled a half-second too long. He came from money, Holloway Construction, a rival company to the one I'd retired from. His mother, Diane, was the kind of woman who called herself traditional while sharpening a knife behind her back. I told Caroline I had a bad feeling. She told me I was just protective, that I didn't trust anyone she dated. She wasn't entirely wrong, but she was wrong about Richard. They married in the spring. Caroline sold the house Linda and I had left her and put the money toward a beautiful home in Brentwood. 6 months later, baby Rose arrived. When I visited them in the hospital, Richard held Rose like she was a trophy. Not a child, a trophy. I noticed it then. I said nothing. For 18 months after that, Caroline called me every Sunday. Then the calls became every other Sunday. Then once a month. Then nothing. For 6 months, total silence. I left voicemails. I sent cards. I drove by the house once. Richard answered the door, told me Caroline was resting, that she'd been having episodes, that it was better for everyone if I gave her space. I believed him. God help me, I believed him. Then I stopped at that red light on Broadway. I screamed her name from across the intersection. Caroline! She flinched like I'd fired a gun. She pressed herself against the brick wall of the bank building behind her, eyes wild, scanning left and right. Then she saw it was me. Something in her face broke open. Relief, terror, and shame all at once. Dad. Her lips were blue. Her voice was barely a sound. Dad, you have to go. They're watching. Who's watching? I reached for her arm. She pulled back. Marcus. He parks across the street. If he sees you talking to me, they'll... She stopped, swallowed. They said they'd hurt you, Dad. They said your heart couldn't take it. I looked across the street. Dark Tahoe, tinted windows, engine running. Get in my truck, I said, not a suggestion. She hesitated. Rose made a small sound under the plastic. Alive, thank God. That sound made the decision for Caroline. She got in. I drove without a plan for the first 10 minutes, just needing distance. The cab smelled of wet wool and cold skin and something metallic I didn't want to name. Caroline was shaking so hard the seat vibrated. Rose was pale, her little face rashy, but breathing. Where is Richard? I finally asked. I kept my voice low, controlled. Caroline flinched at his name like it was a slap. He's at the house. Does he know you're out here? A sound came out of her, half laugh, half sob. He drove us here, Dad. Shift starts at 8 a.m. If I don't bring back $50 by dark, they don't let us inside. The truck swerved. I corrected it. My knuckles were white on the wheel. I drove north. I own a small fishing cabin near the Duck River that nobody knows about. Not friends, not neighbors, not Richard Holloway. Just a wood stove and 4 walls and a lock on the door. I got him inside, got a fire going, heated soup from a can. Caroline ate it standing over the stove, shoveling it in with shaking hands, and I understood she hadn't eaten that day. I watched my granddaughter sleep on a pile of old blankets, and I felt something ancient and furious wake up inside of me. Once Rose was out and the warmth had settled into Caroline's bones, she talked. It started right after Rose was born. Diane moved in to help. Suddenly nothing Caroline did was right. Too emotional, too tired, too unstable. Richard would wake her up every hour through the night, claiming Rose was crying when she wasn't. They wore her down, methodically, like you'd break a horse. 3 weeks postpartum, still on heavy medication from her C-section infection, Richard came in with a stack of documents. He said it was a trust fund for Rose, that he needed to protect her future. And you signed. I signed everything, she wept, quiet, ashamed. He held my hand while I signed. He told me he loved me. It wasn't a trust fund. It was a transfer of assets. She'd signed over her inheritance from Linda, $400,000. The deed to the Brentwood house, which had been in her name, and a sweeping power of attorney that handed Richard control of every financial decision she could legally make. The money was gone within 48 hours, wired to an account in Diane Holloway's name in the Cayman Islands. Once they had the money, Caroline said, staring into the fire, they didn't need the wife anymore. But they didn't kick her out immediately. That would look bad. Richard was running for Metro Nashville City Council. He needed a narrative. So they built one. They drove Caroline to the worst neighborhoods in the city, Marcus behind the wheel, always Marcus, and left her there with a cardboard sign. They took her phone, her wallet, her keys. They filmed her. They photographed her looking disheveled, desperate, broken. They were building a case, she whispered. A file, proof that I was mentally unfit to be a mother. They wanted Rose, Dad, full custody, and they wanted me to disappear. She'd tried to run once. She'd gotten close to a police station. Marcus had texted her a photo. Me, standing in my front yard, taken through a zoom lens, close enough to count the wrinkles on my face. He said you'd have a heart attack before dinner if I talked to anyone, so I got back in the car. She had stayed on that corner to keep me alive. I stood and walked to the window and stared out at the black Tennessee woods for a long time. In 70 years, I had never hated anyone, not once. That night, I learned what hate felt like. On the 3rd morning at the cabin, the rain had finally stopped. I was on the porch with my coffee when I heard it, gravel popping under slow, heavy tires. A black Tahoe rolled up the drive. I moved Caroline and Rose to the back bedroom, told her to lock the door and stay quiet no matter what she heard. I took the old Remington down from above the mantel, checked the chamber. The driver's window rolled down. Marcus Holloway, sunglasses, that greasy smile. "Morning, Frank. Nice place you got out here." He looked at the cabin like he was pricing it. "Little far from civilization for a man your age, though." "Get off my land." My voice was flat as a road. Now. No need for drama. We're just worried about Caroline. Postpartum psychosis is a serious condition. We want to get her the help she needs. She's not here. Marcus laughed and stepped out of the truck. He was 40 years old and 220 pounds, and he knew it. "We tracked your truck's GPS, Frank. Don't embarrass yourself. Send her out, and nobody gets hurt. You don't want to have a cardiac event out here in the middle of nowhere. No ambulance gonna reach you in time." He took a step toward the porch. I raised the Remington, not aimed at him, just held it across my chest where he could see it clearly. He stopped. "I was a union foreman for 35 years, I said. "I have handled difficult men my entire life. You are going to get back in that vehicle and drive away. And if you or your brother ever come near my daughter or my granddaughter again, the next conversation we have won't be on a porch." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that means this isn't over, and got back in the Tahoe. "We'll be back with a badge, Frank. Enjoy the quiet." He was gone in a cloud of gravel dust. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down on the porch steps. We had maybe 12 hours. I called Tom Garland. Tom and I had gone to Vanderbilt together 50 years ago. He'd become the kind of attorney who didn't advertise. He didn't need to. He specialized in fraud, financial crimes, and what he called men who think they're untouchable. "Get in your truck," he said, after I gave him 30 seconds of it. "Come straight to my office. Don't stop anywhere." We arrived looking like refugees. Tom took one look at Caroline and told his secretary to cancel everything for the rest of the week. We sat in his conference room and Caroline told him everything. When she finished, Tom didn't look surprised. He looked the way he used to look before a big trial. Focused, cold, ready. "It's a textbook operation," he said. "Isolate, gaslight, strip assets, frame for incompetence, take the child." He paused. "The problem right now is that she signed the documents. On paper, it looks clean. We need something that doesn't look clean." He called in Peggy Sutton. Peggy was a forensic accountant who looked like she baked pies on weekends and destroyed financial records on weekdays. She arrived within the hour with 2 laptops and a satellite connection. "If the money moved, I'll find the trail," she said. She started typing. She didn't look up for 40 minutes. When she did, she was smiling, not warmly. "He was sloppy, arrogant. He thought you were too broken to ever check." She turned the screen. The asset transfer documents had been backdated, but the digital timestamp on the bank server showed they'd been uploaded at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. Caroline had been in the hospital ICU with a post-surgical infection that night. She hadn't signed anything. The notary stamp on every document belonged to a woman who had died in 2021. Forgery. Every document void. "There's more," Peggy said, her voice going quieter. She'd pulled Richard's cloud backup. He'd never secured it. Text between Richard and Marcus going back 14 months. Instructions on which corners to drop Caroline at, what time to pick her up, how to film her so she looked worse. A line that made Caroline grab my hand. "If she tries to leave, remind her about the old man's heart." And then Peggy found one more thing. A life insurance policy taken out on Caroline 3 weeks after Rose was born, $2 million, double indemnity for accidental death. Tom set down his pen. "They weren't just trying to take your daughter's money and her child," he said. "They were waiting for the street to finish the job." The room was very quiet. Caroline's hand tightened on mine. Tom picked up the phone. He called the district attorney's office directly, a woman he'd known for 20 years. She listened for 4 minutes without interrupting. Then she said, "I want everything on my desk by morning." We set the trap the next day. Tom's office reached out to Richard's attorney. Caroline was exhausted and ready to surrender. She'd signed the custody papers. Could they meet at the Hilton downtown, neutral ground, tomorrow morning? Richard agreed immediately. Of course he did. He thought he'd already won. The morning of the meeting, I put on my good suit, the one Linda had bought me for our 30th anniversary. A little tight in the shoulders. I didn't care. Caroline wore a simple navy dress. She looked tired, but she looked like herself for the first time in months, like the woman I'd raised, not the ghost they'd tried to make her into. "You don't have to go in there," I told her in the elevator. "Yes, I do," she said, "for Rose." Tom had set a camera in the conference room, disguised in a speaker. Peggy was in the next room with the audio feed. 2 plainclothes detectives were in the lobby. At 10 a.m. sharp, the door opened. Richard walked in, flanked by Diane and Marcus. He was wearing a $2,000 suit and carrying a folder of papers. He looked at Caroline the way a man looks at a problem that is about to be solved. "Ellie?" He opened his arms. "Oh, honey, thank God you're safe." Caroline didn't move. "Sit down, Richard." His smile flickered. He sat. "We have the papers ready." he said, sliding the folder across. Full custody to him, supervised visitation for Caroline on weekends, a signed agreement that she would enter a wellness facility of his choosing. And the money? Tom asked. The inheritance? The house? Diane's lip curled. Reimbursement for the emotional disruption she's caused this family. So you admit the transfer happened? Tom said pleasantly. He opened his own folder. One photograph. The text message. Make sure she stays on the corner until 6. We need the bad lighting for the video. Richard's face didn't change. Not yet. Tom slid the bank records across. Then the notary logs, with the death certificate of the notary attached. Then the insurance policy. The color left Richard's face like water draining from a tub. Marcus stood up. This is illegal. You hacked his phone. Cloud backup, unsecured. Discoverable. Tom checked his watch. And by the way, this meeting has been streaming live to the district attorney's server since you walked in. She sends her regards. The door opened. 2 uniformed officers. 1 detective. Richard Holloway. Marcus Holloway. Please stand up. Richard looked at Caroline. And for 1 second, just one, the mask came completely off. What I saw underneath it was something small and cold and ugly. You'll regret this, he said. Caroline stood. She looked him straight in the eye. I already lived through the worst you could do to me, she said, and I'm still here. It took 8 months for the courts to finish what that conference room started. Richard and Marcus both took plea deals rather than face trial. Wire fraud, forgery, coercion, conspiracy. Richard got 7 years. Marcus got 4. Diane Holloway is still fighting her charges alone, with no family money left to pay her attorneys. The forged documents were voided. Caroline got her inheritance back. She got the house back. She sold it. Too many bad memories soaked into those walls. She used the money to buy a small craftsman house with a big yard, 3 houses down from me, on Elm Creek Road, the same street where she grew up. It's October again now, a year later, the good kind of October, crisp and golden. I'm sitting on my back porch yesterday afternoon, and I can hear Rose laughing in the yard next door. She's walking now. No, she's running, chasing a monarch butterfly through the fallen leaves. Caroline is on the porch watching her, a cup of coffee in her hands. She looks over at me and smiles. A real smile. The kind that goes all the way to her eyes. The kind I hadn't seen in 2 years. She has Linda's smile. I had forgotten that. I had to look away for a moment. People my age, people who've seen 60, 70, 80 years of living, we know something that younger folks are still figuring out. We know that the world does not protect the good people automatically. It just doesn't work that way. Contracts get broken, promises get twisted. People who smile the widest sometimes have the coldest hearts. And we know something else. We know what it costs to love someone. Real love isn't a feeling. It's a decision. It's the decision you make when you're standing in the pouring rain, when every logical part of your brain says keep driving. I was a 70-year-old man with a bad hip and a heart my doctor worries about. I had no business running across Broadway in a rainstorm. But that was my daughter. And that was my granddaughter. I would do it again, in a second, without a single hesitation. If you are watching this, and you have someone in your life who has gone quiet, a child, a sibling, a friend, who used to call and doesn't anymore, please don't wait for them to reach out. Sometimes the people who need us most are the ones who have been convinced they don't deserve our help. Go find them. You might be the only one who does. Thank you for spending this time with me and with Caroline's story. She asked me to share it. She said, Dad, if even one person watches this and drives a little slower past that street corner, it's worth it. I think she's right. God bless you and your families. Take care of the people you love. Goodbye for now.